Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Practical Founders Podcast, where every week we hear an amazing story from a serious founder who built a valuable software company and did it without big funding. I'm your host, Greg Head, and this week my guest is Brian Dosal, the former CEO and co founder of BrightGauge, a company that he and his brother created, grew, and sold in 2019 successfully as a bootstrap practical founder. He took his, quote, retirement for a couple years and worked on one of his passion projects called Strety, Strety.com, which is his new SaaS business, another practical bootstrapped software company that helps small businesses implement the entrepreneurial operating system, EOS, the popular business operating system. And Strety is taking off, and his brother's in the business. Brian has done it creatively and frugally and practically the whole way, and he's got another successful software company on the way. Hey, Brian, welcome to the Practical Founders Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
Yeah, we caught up in Park City, Utah, where you are today at the Kiln co-working space. We were connected by our buddy John Jessup, who is an awesome practical founder in Park City there, a bootstrapper with a serious business, and he connected us, and we talked about your amazing story. I'm really excited to talk about it, and you're kind of a fanatic about a few things in how businesses are run and how you are building your businesses. So I really want to talk about that. So what is the state of play in Park City, Utah, in the mountains today? I have a place there. We ski and go back and forth. I'm not there today. Is there snow coming?
There is snow today. This weekend was 50 degrees. We're sitting here early
Yeah.
March, and I was on a run with shorts and a t-shirt, and in the morning and afternoon I was skiing, so it was like a spring day. And then now it's dumping again. So you got to come back and we'll hit the slopes together.
Yeah. And is that your permanent residence these days for you and your family?
Yes. Yeah. I
Okay.
have two young kids, and we moved from Miami, Florida about a year ago now. And so
Right.
now as a permanent resident. I thought the pace was going to be slower, which it is in a way, but being in this co-working space, meeting people like John and yourself, this is an active town, both,
Yeah.
you know, athletically and professionally. So
It's kind
happy
of
about
full of
that.
practical founders and software execs and people who did well and love the mountains and skiing and don't want to do it in Tahoe in California.
There's
We
this, it's, what is that dangerous word people say, the lifestyle business people, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of those here, which is, I know it's a practical founder, but
Yeah.
yeah, lifestyle is important here.
Yeah, great. Well, it's a little surprising you grew up in Miami, right? And you built a company there and ended up in the snow town. So that doesn't happen very often, people going that direction.
No, and for us, it was a decision for the family, for my
Yeah.
young kids, my wife and I, and so it's not often do people leave warm weather for cold weather,
Yeah.
it was tough to pull my wife away, but the small town vibe, the more outdoorsy athletic vibe was something that we wanted for the kids,
Awesome.
and that's what drove it. So we miss home, but this is starting to feel like home quite a bit.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you're an entrepreneur. You come from an entrepreneurial family. You and your brother started a software company, BrightGauge, that you grew and then sold in 2019. We'll talk about that. And now you've got a new venture called Strety, Strety.com, for the EOS entrepreneur operating system world,
Yeah.
EOS. And we'll talk about that too. So you're kind of a chronic entrepreneur, and you were in Miami. Was it a hot scene there for tech when you were creating your first company or your
No,
second one?
no, it was not at all. And so this is a good story. And those that were in Miami for in the 2008 to 2012, like there was this fake, tech scene back then is what I called it. And we
Yeah.
actually struggled to find talent. There
Hmm.
was big software companies and big, the cruise line, stuff like that, where
Yeah.
people went to go work, but there's not the startup scene was not as it is today. So
Yeah.
we really struggled back then to find quality engineers, especially on the software development side. And so now it shifted, but it shifted right around once we sold. I mean, we kind of missed the boat there.
Yeah.
I want to say we're one of the We were one of the
Right.
early ones that kind of
Yeah.
created that ecosystem, that created the
Mhm.
safety net. I think it's always like, employees and, engineers especially, they want to have a place that then if they have to hop jobs, they want to be able to have an ecosystem they could hop to. And
Yeah.
Miami didn't have that until it
Yeah.
did, right? And
Yeah.
then as soon as it does, then it worked out well. But we missed that ride. But we ended up finding like the constraints always create a great place to win, and finding like having to find the best engineers in a very small town made those engineers even better, and it made our team even better. So it
Back when
worked
you
out in the
hired
end.
people locally, in the old days. Isn't that funny?
Like we used to have to hire very, obviously very talented people, but then they had to drive to the office, right? Which nowadays seems crazy that you have to drive to an office. And so the radius that we had was pretty small, and so the pickings we had were pretty small. But again, it worked out great. That team was awesome, and we were all in office. Like that was a in office classic startup. No ping pong table, but a keg, right? Like
Yeah.
we
Okay.
had that vibe going there.
Awesome. Well, let's start with BrightGauge. You're a practical founder. You and your brother bootstrapped a software company, grew it, and sold it in 2019, early 2019,
Yeah.
before the COVID boom. So you kind of
Yeah.
missed out on that one. But let's start with the end there, just so people have a sense for BrightGauge. About how big was it when you sold it in early 2019?
Yeah, so I think what we sold is about a low 30 employee count. So about, I think,
Yeah.
let's say 30, 32, and we were just shy of 10 million in ARR, and a
Oh,
very, very traditional SaaS. I think the ARPU, the average revenue per customer was maybe back then 300-400 bucks. So we had a bunch of customers
a
all over the
month
world.
or an
A
annual?
month,
Yeah. Yeah.
a
Okay.
month.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. For
So,
so kind of a small businessy software, like but
yeah.
serious kind of tool thing there. So 30 employees and 10 million in revenue. That sounds kind of profitable back then,
Oh
like
yeah.
one of those
Yeah,
kind of
yeah, yeah.
businesses. Yeah.
Yeah, those last few years of profit made up for those first few years of hell and and trying to find
The
that revenue.
adjustment. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was very profitable.
Yeah. And what was it exactly? Bright Gauge.
So analytics company, and we targeted a specific industry. So we sold to managed services providers,
Hmm.
MSPs.
Hmm.
And if you're familiar with them, if they're small, they're all small businesses that service other companies, usually in their local area. So
IT
there's
services that manage your
yeah,
network
IT
and
services.
computers and, cybersecurity and things like that for small businesses.
Exactly. So, like an outsourced IT department for, the flower shop down the street or a local
Yeah.
bank, they would
They're
outsource
everywhere.
to these MSPs, and MSPs were everywhere, and we targeted them. And the niche was, we knew their data systems. So those MSPs had 5 or 6 CRM type, products that they were using.
Hmm.
And so we plugged into those systems before they even had very well developed APIs. A lot of them were even on-premise SQL databases.
Oh
This
my
is, I mean,
goodness.
APIs were not even
Yeah.
popular back then.
Hmm.
And we would pull data out and then we presented it back, whether in reports or what became very popular, these real-time dashboards.
Yeah.
So think of a dashboard up on a screen
Yeah.
around an office. You walk around and you see it, and it's updating real time. It's got your lights, your reds, yellows, greens.
Hmm.
We did that for these MSPs.
Right. So this, would you call this business intelligence, those dashboards and BI tools for big
Yeah,
companies with, they would put their IT teams on it. But this was vertical. This was out of the box, pointed at your data, and we already know what's important to your managed service
exactly.
providers, and we'll give you the right to data so you could run your business better, all that
Yep.
thing. Right.
100%. And business intelligence usually meant this bigger product, but we always try to make it feel lightweight because
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I got to
Yeah.
plug
Lovely.
in. But
Yeah.
even out of those 30 employees, I think, let's say 10 were success people, but they were really just, hey, we'll build whatever you want for you. We were like outsourcing that BI mentality for these customers.
Hmm.
Um,
So there was a little
so yeah, so
custom screens you could build, and I want to see it this way, and I like it that way,
exactly,
and all that normal stuff.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you charge for that as a service? Was that part of your business, or was that just part of making people successful with it?
Making people successful.
There you
That was
go.
the,
Very
yeah, it was a
producty business.
decision we made early on. We used to charge. But then the trick was, which I'm sure people that are listening would have done this before. It's like, hey, this is a $500 service. This is $1,000 service. But you know what? If you stick with us for a year, it's free. So
Yeah.
we used to always include it as part of the fee.
Yeah. Um, it's just an old, I don't want to say trick, it's an old strategy. Services, if you can put some value to it and people show up and it gets done right, it makes your product sticky. It gets people to the epiphany, right?
Absolutely.
So,
And and we're using the same, mentality here at Strety where it's high service, right? Like
hmm,
small businesses are not used to, especially using these big products that are, phenomenal products, but like there's no one they can talk to. Like, hey, I'm a small business owner, and let's say in this world I was a
yeah,
MSP. Like, I'm not a BI person, so yeah, I want your product, but I don't have the time. I don't have the cycles to worry about it. And so we just said, hey, we're high service, and whatever they needed, and we could do it profitably, right? That was obviously the key. But yeah, it was, I've always been a high touch, high service. So the product is, I used to actually always say product was 60% of what we delivered, but just that customer support and that success on that end was 40%. And our customers loved it.
yeah,
They were
that's
raving
awesome.
fans.
And was it one? It's a lot like vertical CRM, right? If they could use Salesforce and then spend a year customizing it for their industry, and then it's too big and it's too much and too expensive, and somebody comes along and says, "Here's exactly what you need in your language,
Exactly.
integrating with the four apps that we you use, and all your friends in the same industry use it, and here's the
Exactly.
explanations, and here's the out of the box, and we can ask you three questions and tell you what your next dashboard should be."
Exactly.
Like all
That's
that
the
stuff.
pract.
Yeah,
Yes, that's the practical founder mentality. I mean, that is the beauty of being nimble and focusing on niche. And so we did
yeah,
exactly that.
yeah.
Microsoft Power BI was a competitor, but
Of course. Yeah,
it's impossible for them to compete with us, just
impossible.
like you said.
I love
So
that, and the one of the reasons you can do magic in the modern SaaS without big funding is through vertical solutions. You can
yes,
build just the
100%.
app. It doesn't take you 20 years to build Salesforce. You can build just the app that solves a specific problem for a specific
Yeah,
industry, and then it spreads really
yeah.
fast. So you don't have to raise
Well,
another round to grow. And drop
exactly,
flyers from the
and
sky. Everybody in MSP land was probably talking about it.
100%. And to be honest, like when we started, we didn't think of this as, hey, let's go be $1 billion company. This was, my father was an entrepreneur, and he was a very profit driven person. So profit was kind of ingrained in us from the beginning. But as selling to the MSPs, we're like, hey, let's just build you know, this product to sell to these MSPs. And we think there's a business model there that can show up pretty quickly, right? And so that we'll
Hmm.
be profitable pretty quickly. But the thought was, well, this is a small industry. Like there's not much here. There's not this big company here. It
Right.
wasn't until
The vertical myth,
six
really.
years later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't until 6, 7 years later that like, oh, there's big opportunity here. And as the people, I know we'll talk about the acquisition, but
Yeah.
everyone was circling us, and we heard about valuations, and we kept on saying, "Wait for this? This is and this little thing." So that was,
Yeah.
and I
That's
know we'll
great.
talk about lessons learned, but for sure that was one that we had never even believed. We didn't understand. We were naive when we were building this
Yeah.
out. We just thought it was going to be a small company, and that was okay by us.
Yeah.
And a big
A
exit, which
software
was
business
fun.
as
But
a small business.
yeah, and offer
Interesting.
good service, and just if it's 5 million in revenue and dropping 2.5 to the bottom line, that sounds great. It's a good
Yeah.
business.
It is pretty cool.
Um,
Well,
yeah,
let's talk about your acquisition in 2019 to Continuum Managed Services, which was private equity owned and then rolled up into another thing. So part of that
yeah,
whole game there. But can you say about how much you sold your almost $10 million software business? And 2019 was heading up in valuations, not quite COVID crazy, but it was heading up.
yeah. 20. It was actually we closed. I think it was December 2018. So right at the end
Ah,
of 2018.
yeah.
And what's funny enough, the market was crashing at that time. Hilarious. And we're like, oh, we got out before the crash. But little did you know that.
Yeah.
But funny enough, and I think you actually brought this up to me when we met. We it was an all cash deal, and so we did fine because we put the money in the market,
Ah,
right? You got to do
right.
something with
Yes,
the
right.
market.
You're waiting for the
So
crash to invest.
right.
Very nice.
But no, we have not publicly disclosed how much we sold, but
Yeah.
evaluations was a typical SaaS, fast growing. I think we were growing 100% that last year, so and
And
highly
profitable.
profitable. So yeah, so it was
So there's a rule
the
of 40. If you have 20% growth and 20% profitability, that's 40 total. But you had more than 100% growth and very
yeah,
profitable. You're
very
kind of
profitable.
a ridiculous rule. And, that was kind of an A plus property in a market that, started small but was actually quite big.
Yeah, our biggest fear and like one small motivator of selling was we didn't know like to jump to the next market. So we because that vertical integration that we had, because of the deep knowledge we had, like how do we go after the next one, right? Like how do we go after
Yeah,
the plumbers association? What numbers do they care about? What
yeah.
dashboards do they want to know? And so that was a bit intimidating in a sense. And so we
The
thought we may
classic
have been
problem
capped
for
out.
verticals is to go one step over, and it's a
Yeah.
completely different world, a completely different language and a network and everything. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
And so we had, yeah, we felt like maybe we had capped out. I don't think we did. I think the acquirers would tell us we didn't.
yeah.
But it was a great deal for everyone. Like I said, it was all cash, so it was good for
And so
us.
that
And
was, about a 10 million, and that was about 10 times was a good one. And maybe it was more because, 10 times multiples of revenue. So somewhere plus or minus $100 million. This wasn't low digits or, a unicorn, but like, that's pretty serious for a bootstrap company. And you and your brother,
it,
right? Owned it?
yeah, yeah, it
Yeah.
was. I mean, and the employees, took home a big share as we all
Hmm.
celebrated, right? They didn't have
Yeah.
shares, in the company, but we big bonuses. My parents had a small stake in it, and so it was
Good
fun
for
for
you.
them. So
Yeah.
it was, yeah, it was. I mean, no complaints, right? It was a big W.
Yeah,
So
excellent. Well, we'll go through the journey, and then we'll also talk
yeah,
of Bright Gauge, and then we'll also talk about your new company, Strety, which is moving quite quickly, and
yeah,
you're doing a
yeah.
lot of things similarly. It's a different kind of market, a little twist on it, and so forth here. So, congratulations as a practical founder. Were you kind of an oddball in Miami even at those times? What do you mean you're building a profitable software company? What do you mean you're just for this tiny niche?
We were the oddballs in the Silicon Valley world. That I was,
Ah,
had a lot of friends in that world. So we never, Miami was, we were trying to be unique in the sense that, hey, we're in Miami and I wouldn't say oddball, but we were focused on a sustainable business. In fact, we didn't ever talk about selling. The selling was a last minute thing, which again, we
yeah,
could talk about that fun
yeah.
story. And so there was plenty of hype in Miami for these companies that would raise money. Even if you raise money, like you got hype in Miami at that time.
Oh, yeah,
And
of
so
course,
we had
yeah.
to
That was
distinguish
the deal.
ourselves as like, no, we're the boring ones. I'll never forget. So odd, maybe it was. I thought, I think most of Miami thought the whole startup mentality was odd in itself. But in our ecosystem, we always consider ourselves the boring ones, the
Yeah,
practical
yeah.
founders.
Yes, right.
I still
Excellent.
never forget I told you that story, I think, but
How
one of the
sexy is
VC
your
back,
multiple? Yeah, that's like, right, yeah.
exactly. But I remember we in Miami, there was this, like the ecosystem that was trying to be built up for startups would have these meetups at 10 a.m. on Wednesdays. And it would call Waffle Wednesdays, and it was this big deal for most of the people. And our employees were like, "Hey, can we go?" I'm like, "No, no, it's 10 a.m. on a Wednesday. Like we have to work." And so that was so to me. So that's your question when you said odd. I said no, I don't find myself. I didn't think we were odd. They were the odd ones,
Yeah.
but certainly from Silicon Valley looking at us, yes, we were a bit odd.
Yeah. So this was your first software company, Bright Gauge?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I had a tech background from college, so I was naive enough that I could, that I knew software was special. I was always practical in the sense that for my father, right, and mother too, like running a
Did you
business,
grow up in
profitable
that
business.
business? They were running it and you got to
Yes,
see it and the whole thing. So,
looking at financial statements at 10 years old on a monthly basis with my father and mother and brother. So we grew up in the business mindset. So, and I could see, I saw how he was as an entrepreneur, truly an entrepreneur, starting
mhm.
from nothing, immigrant from Cuba, starting from nothing and growing it to what, put us through high school and college. I could see that one, it was stressful. He was working all the time. But
Right.
two, there was lots of flexibility, right? That
Ah.
whole lifestyle mentality. So we
Hmm.
could take vacations in the summer. Sometimes they would get canceled because work, whatever.
Hmm.
So I know I just grew up with that mentality. So did my
Yeah.
brother. It was very much ingrained in us. But when we actually ended up working with my father when I was right out of college in the managed services space, hence
Hmm.
why we started, getting in the BrightGauge world. But I always knew that software was where I wanted to be. Again, from college, knowing the flexibility it could provide. So I
Yeah.
had convinced my brother back in 2010, hey, I had this idea of a data aggregation play. We know the target markets. We are the target markets. Let's go try to do this. Let's split it off and go. And he was, kind enough to say, yeah, that's not a bad idea.
And what was it that you saw, being in an industry? Did you experience the problem? You built something for
Yeah.
yourself,
Yep.
and how did
100%.
you know that other people would want it? Because there's a leap in there. You might be more sophisticated than everybody else
Oh,
in
no,
your
naive
industry.
stupidity.
Yeah.
Just naive
Okay.
stupidity.
You
Just
said it works for me. There, everybody ought to have it. Yeah.
exactly. No, yeah, I went to a few conferences back like pre-SaaSter days. There were
Yep.
some conferences even in Miami.
Hmm.
The concept of build it for yourself. I was just introduced to the Basecamp guys, and they were big
Yep.
believers on build it for yourself.
Hmm.
But we did have the luxury of having lots of peers that we could say, hey, this is a design that I came up with. This is a few clicks, early prototype. Would this be something of interest? When they said yes, and they said resounding yes, it gave us the confidence to take that leap and give it a shot.
And what was the epiphany? They're running their businesses. They're busy, scrambling around, fixing everybody's computers and setting things up. And you said, here is the most important numbers you need to see in your business every day. And they all said, oh, thank you. Is that
That
simple?
that that simple. Dashboards are sexy. I still like that. Is
Okay.
you put you put dashboards in front. I mean, especially for IT people, right?
Yeah.
You have these
Oh, right.
numbers and
Uh-huh.
graphs.
Right. There we go. Yeah.
That was the eye candy was real, and so we knew we had something, and we tried. One angle was how to create these dashboards that then they could send to their clients. That didn't work, and then we said, well, wait a second. We have all the data. Why don't we just present it back to them to make them more efficient?
Mm.
And all these existing systems tried to do it themselves, like an add-on product to, hey,
Uh-huh.
but they just didn't do as well as we did. And we took the leap, and it was just put your head down, keep going, and figure out which until we found the profitability, right? Until we found that angle for profitability. So yeah, but
So
a lot of
you didn't
naiveness
invent
was in there.
dashboards. You didn't invent KPIs. You didn't invent MSPs and what was common to them, but you created a better experience and the services approach there, like you solved the real problem and everybody said thank you and we'll pay you, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I didn't, just like I didn't come up with EOS and the business operating
Yeah.
systems, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's how can I create software and an experience that people find valuable enough to pay me, and then is there a
Hmm.
market big enough that there's enough people that would pay me enough that covers my cost.
Yeah. And so how did you get started? Was your brother the coder and you were the sales guy, or vice versa, or did you fund it with some of your own services or something to before it
Vice
got
versa.
profitable? Okay.
So we actually so I was more on the product side, and
Hmm.
he actually my brother didn't join me for about a year, and so I built out the product. I had enough skills, SQL and PHP skills to show someone else what I wanted to get done.
Hmm.
And so we were able to build it the first part. So I was the one doing all the early demos, all the early
Hmm.
support calls for the first year and a half. And then once we started getting any traction, he joined me, and then he ended up taking over all sales and marketing. And then I was doing everything product wise.
You were chief product officer and hiring engineers, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm a mediocre coder, mediocre designer, and decent product guy.
Yeah. But it's still part of the problem. I mean, coding is getting easier, right? But solving a very specific problem in the right way, it's still a tough challenge to figure out. What was different about your solution? Maybe it was just that simple vertical thing. It was out of the box, ready to go for your MSP customers. But was there anything special about it compared to BI and dashboards and other apps? Was there some kind of magic in there that people fell in love with?
Believe it or not, early on, the magic was that we were cloud based, because that was that
Ooh,
long ago.
yeah.
So being cloud based was actually magic at the beginning, and a lot of these a lot of these systems were on premise still, and so
Hmm.
we were able to develop a little agent that sit on these databases, pull data out, and sent it to us. That was pretty special. But then as people moved to the cloud for their core systems, our magic became just the usability on our side. So
Yeah.
yes, I mean, for sure, the vertical understanding of their business, but the UI side was huge for us, and then the services aspect. I mean, I still remember customers still come up to me today and say, "Man, I just loved. I would sign up with BrightGauge, and you guys would build all my dashboards." And it was that easy. So the secret sauce became the services and the product together.
Well, that's interesting. And you came out of a services business where it's done for you, right? Like we'll just take care of it.
Right.
Like, you
Exactly.
probably just occurred to you that like, no, we'll just do it for you. Like, we'll get it done.
Yeah. I think people, I think a lot of, especially for from a practical founder standpoint, right? Like
Hmm.
there's a lot of focus back then on self serve. Like if
Yeah.
you're not self
Yeah. Yeah.
serve, you're not scalable. And I'm like,
Software
I
only.
just couldn't buy
Yeah.
into that.
No touch.
Exactly. No touch. And I think people went, and then they went so inexpensive, right? So that's like, hey, this is $10 a month. Well, it's like, but why? Like someone would pay you $300 a month if you just took care of it. And
Yeah.
so that was our big belief. And my brother was big on this because we kept on raising
Mm.
prices. That was another takeaway that I learned is that I'd
Oh,
be afraid to raise a price because, we told them this and, it's, if we go up, they'll
yeah.
be upset. But like, no, they really valued our service and they thought that the value they
Ah.
were receiving was higher than what it cost. And so we kept raising pricing, and people paid it, and that's okay. And they were super happy with it. And we were able to provide more of a service because of it.
Well, for $300 a month, you need a fair number of clients, customers to get to, let's say, half a million or a million in revenue, right? To imagine paying yourselves and
Yeah.
a little team and getting the flywheel going. How did you
Yeah.
get those number of customers? Like, probably wasn't outbound for a little app like this. Was this like trade shows and networking and, you know?
100%. That was the easy part for us was because we're selling to a niche market, we knew where they hung out and we would go to those conferences and they were because they were IT specific, they were early adopters in all things, and so
Mm.
it was easy for us to acquire customers
Wow.
because they talked to each other, they hung out at the same conferences, and to a large part we were one of them, right? We were a
Yeah.
IT services company, so it was that always the hard part in that company was really building the tech to ingest tons and tons of data from all over the world and present it back quickly in a pretty
Uh,
way. The customer
yeah.
acquisition ended up being a little bit easier than we all expected.
Well, that doesn't usually happen that way. It's meaning almost never. It's we can build the product and then we get it going, and then the hard part is getting to half a million, getting to 2 million, getting to 10 million. But you created your own wave there and solve a technical problem with all this data management, on-prem data, and everything that the others, nobody from Power BI was going to go solve that problem.
No, and it
Yeah.
was intimidating for even competitors in the market to jump into, right? To get in
Yeah.
there. But we, again in that world, we were unique in the sense that yes, it was easy to get in front of customers, but it was the challenge was building the product, and that was not an easy feat. And then charging enough that would pay for that profitability, right? Like some people were paying us 1,000, 2,000 a month, and that sounds like a lot of money, but to them it was, and the value was there. So we could afford, the team to keep building it.
When did you get to profitable and your team worked and your product's pretty reliable and you felt like you could go to the next level? Was that around a million ARR or what did that feel like?
God, that's a good question. I think it was a little more than a million ARR. It was a couple years in. I remember more in the years because of the the torture of getting the right product market fit. But I
Hmm.
think it was above about 1.5 million. We became profitable, and then we actually ran pretty lean since from then. So we were okay keeping low salaries. So just investing every dollar of profit right back into the company. I don't think we really enjoyed the profitability until we hit 4 or 5 million in ARR, which was 5, 6 years into it. So it was a slog
Yeah.
to get to that enjoyment of major profitability. And then even that following year, I remember that next, we were selling in December 2018. That 2019 would have been a monster profit year, just enormous. And that was one thing that I missed, not really feeling that, those big margins, because we had basically hit, we were growing crazy and we didn't need to hire anyone else. We had to hire customer success
Yeah.
people, but like our dev team was
Yeah.
solid, our integration, like that was utopia for us, for a small
Right.
business minded, practical founder type me.
Yeah. You invest and get get your flywheel going in the business. And one of the reasons software companies is so profitable, it's very high margin, and there's this potential of letting it ride and get huge profits there. And you kind of felt that early from your small business discipline there. Did you and your brother make a salary or write checks into this business? How long did you go lean and mean before you started to get paid?
So it was 9 years total. I think the first 4 years, it was me, minimal salary, and my brother was still basically helping out the family business.
Yeah.
And then after that, we were taking full salaries from the company. And remember, the other
Yeah.
caveat too is no lifestyle inflation, if you will. Like we were just married,
Hmm.
no kids, so we could run our lives pretty lean. So we did
Yeah.
that. We were able to pay ourselves a very small salary. Like I remember the private the people that acquired us, had to add back in quite a bit of salary for the next CEO, right? The person that they would have to hire. So I was like,
Surprise.
man,
Yeah.
you're getting me for a discount here. So
Yeah.
the I I'll tell you we missed like the Facebook, Google of the worlds where they just zoom past profitability and they're just crushing it with cash flow. Like we had just hit that first year, and then there were some beautiful years to come. So I missed that, like I said, and I'm Strety. I look forward to.
That's your kind of try to get that profit engine revved
Yeah,
up again, and maybe this time you'll resist the offer you can't refuse here. So,
exactly.
so in between getting it up and running, a little product market fit, and you got to profitability, was this kind of business as usual? Do more trade shows, keep your customers happy, add a few features, and let's go. And were you working 6 days a week on this thing, or how did you
Yeah,
get up to
Greg,
10 million? That's a major milestone.
the the Greg, you make it sound so easy when you said it just there. It,
I know, like,
it
yeah,
was,
dot, dot, dot. Right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's why I have gray hairs now at 42 years old. But no, it was the first few years we kept on shooting ourselves in the foot from a technical perspective. We couldn't find the right development team to build the right product, and it was a hard
Yeah.
problem to solve. Then the other challenges were figuring out the whole services and how we're going to offer this incredible service at the same fees. Like it was just this constant. I always felt like we were behind, right? That was the feeling that we always had. Like we were just. So you say like, hey, just add a few features, this and that. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't feel like that at all. I think
Okay. Just
actually
checking.
yeah, we were chasing our tails for a while. There was a lot of there's a lot of anxiety over: are we doing the right things? Are we charging enough? Is our churn too low? Like the SaaS world wasn't as mature to have these metrics and have these benchmarks.
Hmm.
So which is what is so different from nowadays till back then. Just there's a lot more awareness, and even for me personally, a lot more confidence. But it ended up being as simple as keep building good features, keep taking care of our customers, keep going to trade shows, spending a little bit more each year on trade shows. That was one thing that we did a poor job at. We could have spent more on customer acquisition, going to more trade shows,
Hmm.
but these were our dollars, right? So you can't
Yeah.
spend too many of these dollars. Our little
Yeah.
booth in the by the bathroom was
Hmm.
$5,000. We didn't want to spend the $50,000, to have the marquee spot. So it was just figuring all that stuff out and trusting that not being able to trust that this was the right decision. But obviously, in hindsight, most of them were the right decision. So,
Yeah, good. So you got this up, your team grew, and you were still in the same space. You weren't trying to go sideways or sell other MSP
no, yeah,
software. You were kind of building this and surprised at how big this market was. How did this
yeah.
deal materialize if you weren't trying to sell this company and it was starting to, be profitable for you? And so somebody has to make you an offer that, disrupts the
Yeah.
virtuous
Well,
flywheel.
the the fun stories, because by the way, I've listened to a bunch of your podcasts, obviously, and I love these
Mhm.
stories. Right, the acquisition stories are always, they're different.
Yeah.
They're great. My unique one was we had just, like I said, we were crushing it at that point. Cash flow was coming
Yeah.
in. Everyone was having a great time. The culture was amazing. We had a very base camp. If your listeners know base camp, a lot of their perks we had borrowed their
Jason
inspiration. So it was
Fried
just
and the
Jason.
rework and Basecamp and his
Exactly.
philosophies for how to run a sustainable,
Exactly.
software
And
company.
taking care of your employees, and we really did, and I loved that. So we had constantly been probed and talked to about being acquired, and most of the time I ignore the emails. But one person, individual, young guy like me at the time, I had known before, and so I picked up his call. It was like July or June, and he's like, "Hey, we'd love to acquire you guys." I was like, "We're not selling. There's just zero interest. Like we're going to double this company, and then we'll look at it maybe." My second kid was born, my son, and I was in the hospital with him on day two, and I got a slide deck that showed valuation for another company in our space that we didn't find to be as strong technically of a company. Not a competitor, but
Hmm.
just someone in the MSP space. But I saw their valuation. I sent it to my brother. I'm on 2 hours of sleep. And the next day I get out of the hospital, he's like, no, we should look at selling this thing. Like it's been long enough. And I said no. And, we're equal partners. And he says,
Oh.
listen, he said,
Yeah.
he's like, you're great at building the products. You're doing, and this is word for word, literally, or pretty close to it. He says, but this is too much money not to not consider. And so I went back to that original guy that I had said no to. Said, actually, this is 2 months later. Actually, we're kind of interested now, so let's have a conversation. So that was August. My son was born August 4th. So my brother basically said, hey, I want to look at this. I said, under three conditions: a certain amount of money, it had to be all
Hmm.
cash, and I wasn't going to be the CEO after the deal closes. I didn't, I had all, we had created this great culture environment of which we were the practical founders, and to sell it felt like it would have been, and to me to stay on to then pretend to be,
In
the CEO of
control.
this PE backed company, would have been disingenuous.
Hmm.
So my brother's in that conversation, another heated conversation. He said, "Well, you just killed whatever fake deal we had in place. No one's going to buy that." So anyway, the so that was the reason why we entertained offers, and then once, so we did the appropriate thing. We hired bankers.
Oh, you did.
Uh,
Yeah.
I did, yes, and it's an interesting thing because and we knew there was three or four real potential acquirers, strategic buyers, if you will, and
Hmm.
two of them had private equity backing. So we hired bankers to basically put our deck together and to get our data more organized in preparation
Hmm.
for what we knew was coming after an LOI was potentially
Right.
signed.
Hmm.
So once we had a few meetings with those strategics, and one of them just felt really right, and the number was, they hit all my criteria, and so my brother said, "Hey, well, here we go," and we signed the LOI November, and the deal closed 5 weeks later.
Okay, so there's a couple things in there, and there's founders in some of my practical founders peer groups that say, I'm gonna run this, double it a couple more times before I consider selling it." And then somebody
Yep.
comes with an offer, and they say, well, maybe, and
Yeah.
that's the game we're playing there. Were the bankers surprised that you wanted all cash and I don't want to be CEO and here's the terms? Like, did they think that was a deal breaker or they could work around that?
They could work around it. They were very elusive with all of our, because we kept on saying, "Hey, these are our requirements, and this is how much." And they were like, "I was like, can we get it? Like let's not waste all this time if we're not going to get it." And they were very elusive with those answers. But yeah, that first meeting, the acquirers were very curious on why I wanted to leave, and they were
Hmm.
very curious on what was I hiding, right? What was I not
Ah, yeah,
disclosing?
yeah.
But they came to see that, they came to understand that there was nothing being hidden. I just wasn't the right. I couldn't be the face of the organization, and we had prepped my best friend, who's actually my business partner now at Strety. He was our head of sales at BrightGauge, and he was very much in line to become the GM. He could have done it. So
Yeah.
the story all checked out. But yes, the acquirers were very curious why I wanted all cash and to leave right away. They're like, "What's hidden underneath the mattresses here?" But
Yeah, and you realize you were very intentional and systematic about creating this business. It wasn't a wild and crazy. It was a very dialed in business,
no,
probably. And you said there's a very different kind of game I don't want to play when it's part of something
yeah,
else.
yeah, we actually, which is a good segue from the Strety conversation, because we actually
Yeah.
ran on EOS, the entrepreneurial
Oh,
operating
sure.
system,
Right.
and that was the playbook for me and how to grow with this company that was growing. I was 34 years old, growing this company incredibly fast with a bunch of young people on my team. Not,
Hmm.
they've never managed people, and so we actually were given that book Traction. So for the listeners that haven't read
Yeah.
Traction, that is the business book that is the foundation for EOS, and that stabilized our company. So SaaS business is pretty clean, easy, credit cards, right? Thousands of credit cards.
Yeah.
It's the data is easy to pull, and then this is how the team runs. Our sales organization was pretty tightly run by my best friend Larry,
Hmm.
um, and the product team had a good roadmap. So yeah, it was there was nothing chaotic, and that was one of the beautiful things that I love and loved back then about Traction and EOS is that we did not run a chaotic business. It was growing fast, but it was not chaotic, especially the last 4 years.
Why don't you explain to our listeners, Brian, about what is EOS and when does it show
Yeah,
up in software businesses? Maybe a third of the founders in 35 in my Practical Founders peer groups run on EOS
yeah,
or an EOS type business operating system. Why don't you describe
yeah.
what it does, and what it did for you?
Yeah. So the way I always describe it is like it is a playbook to how to run a small business, and a small business being 10 employees to let's say 200 employees.
Yeah,
The system provides tools. This is their language, not mine.
yeah, yeah,
Tools to how to run your organization. At the core of it,
sure.
you have a let's say 15 people. You're the founder or an early executive. Things are becoming disorganized, and EOS the system comes in and says this. Yeah, exactly. This is how you run. At the core of it, run meetings, weekly meetings. This
Hmm.
is what you talk about. This is how you solve issues. This is how you set a 3 month goal. This is why a 3 month goal works. And so you kind of adopt these tools, and let's just call the meeting as the main tool.
Hmm.
And it's like, oh, this is it. This is how you run a business. And when I read the book, and it's a very simple book to read, I was like, it hit me at that time because we were, I think, let's say we're 18 employees, so you had four different departments, and I wasn't meeting with everyone. So everyone had to be speaking the same language. And so EOS just was that common language and common process on how to run a business. For and one more thing I'll say about it is, we were just like any founder, practical founder, especially like intentional about building a product, intentional about, delivering a service, figuring out, but no one tells you, hey, when you're 20 employees, you have managers, you have employees, you have systems that need to be put in place to run the
Right,
business.
right. And
Basecamp
these days
to
we
to
call those
my
business operating systems. How do you set uh, 3-year goals and visions,
exactly.
and what do we need to do by the end of the year, and what's happening this quarter, and how do you break those boulders up into
Yes,
rocks and pebbles and keep track of everybody's going on, the KPIs or, the,
right. All of us read a bunch of business books, right? And a lot of them,
yes,
especially consulting ones, they're very pie in the sky. They're very like, hey, what's your big goal for 10 years? Like, as practical founders, we're in the trenches. Like, how do we run tomorrow's meeting? Hey, how do we handle the fires that we got to put out? And that's what EOS and the book Traction and really shined a light on is day to day how to go from chaos to calm. And they just had this framework in place. And that was
yeah.
you
What
know
was your
set
favorite part? I know they have names for the different components. What was your favorite part of EOS
the
inside your business?
L10 meetings, the weekly meetings, the
Yeah.
simple agendas on how to run and how to call a tangent on someone that's going off on the rails on some other topic, how to stay focused on solving issues, how much time you allot to talk about the numbers versus the issues like that. It is dead simple, but man, it is business changing. Just the
And if
L10.
you
And so
don't
that's
do
why,
it, it's a freaking mess. There's really no company that gets to $10 million for the number of customers you're serving that doesn't create some structure, some
yeah,
organization inside the business with the people, and some way to do it. Because the more people you have, the more directions people go. So the bigger
yeah,
you get, this is the irony, and why you can compete with small business, compete with big companies, is the bigger you get, it's really hard to keep the main thing the main thing.
the main thing exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
No, and
So
and and 100%. And if you don't follow a system like EOS, like you said, you're doing something. Like there's some
yeah,
system that you're running, some
yeah,
cultural norms that you've developed. EOS just put names and
yeah,
systems already in place. So for me, it made total sense for my young employees,
yeah.
we're all
You took
newish
that model.
to the model.
Yeah.
The core values aspect of it was also pretty impactful. So
Hmm.
early on, we would hire, what people call a warm body syndrome. Like we need someone that's just find a warm body and plug them into the company.
Ah, yes.
EOS had the concept that got to make sure they follow your same core values. And core values is that I don't know, consultancy type term that a lot of us don't
Yeah.
like, but there's truth to it. Like either you
Yeah.
say these are
Sure.
your core values or they exist without you saying it. We'll say this other thing. Jason Fried, who again I'm a big fan of at Basecamp, they around the same time they were starting to think about this too because they had this talk that they gave that I listened to that said treat your business as a product,
Hmm.
and that changed the game for me. It was like, oh yeah, I have to. How am I running the team? How am I focused on efficiencies within the team so we can stay small and stay profitable? Right? It rings the
Yeah.
same tune. So that was also around the same time that I was introduced to Traction. So obviously fell in love with it, and it was a big help.
Yeah. Great. Awesome. And when you sold it, they were probably surprised about how organized you were. Is this,
Totally.
let's say, smaller but fast growing company?
Totally. I mean, they were very surprised. I mean, to the point that they were nervous, right up until about a week. I was like, no, trust me. Like, I'll be here, but you won't need me. And then I think afterwards, when they didn't need me, I think it flipped that I was like, wait a second, I was really useless for a while there at the
Yeah.
end. So it was,
That's the
but
irony of
like,
founder to CEO. You're not going to do everything and you feel, quote,
right.
useless, right? Yeah.
No, and again, Larry did a great job after the fact. And they kept the company, the culture intact, the processes intact, and it ran great. And then they sold themselves, and I think then it started really turn around. So it was a good story for the employees understood why we did it. Sure, everyone would love to keep it going because we were having a great time, but at least they had an extra year of good continuity.
Yeah. And so, did you walk away the next day and I guess go to the beach there in Miami and look out
Yeah,
at the ocean and say, "Oh my
yeah,
goodness, this is crazy."
it was surreal. I mean, I think I one time in college I was as hungover as I was the day after the sale of BrightGauge. So, but it was December 12th, I think it was the date, and we couldn't tell employees until after the holidays because we didn't want to freak people out.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, when I announced it January, whatever day it was, I left the next day and had no email, nothing to do.
Wow.
37 years old. My wife is a physician and she went back to work the next day. The kids, I had a 4 month old. So it was surreal. And there was a kind of like, all right, now what? Um, but we had originally, one of the dreams was, hey, let's take this Strety concept because that Strety did exist in BrightGauge towards the end, and let's give it another go. And so I had something to do, but it was not full time, and it was very unique. But
And then
nothing
COVID
too
hit.
bad.
Yeah, a year later, and
Yeah,
all of that.
yeah. COVID hit a year later. The world's coming to an end type of situation. I was in a good spot, and that's when officially I retired. And it sounds
Mm,
odd to say it, but we had tried to get this Streti thing a go, but it was a half-hearted attempt. It was about a year, and COVID hit, and we said, "Hey, this isn't working. Let's just enjoy our W." I didn't know what I was going to do, to be honest,
yeah.
professionally. I knew I was too young to retire, but my wife was started working a little bit more, going to more conferences. I helped with the kids. My brother thought I was a little crazy doing nothing, but I kind of enjoyed that time. It actually forced me to enjoy the more of the outdoors that I'm living in
Mm,
Utah. But
hmm.
then Streti came back. I know you know the backstory a little bit, but Streti came back
Yeah.
a few years later to rear its head.
Well, congratulations on a practical founder win for you and your brother, and your parents who owned a little bit. That must have been nice to send them a check when you sold the company, so forth. But you had discovered the EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system, running your business, and you loved that systematic approach and the structure. You created software for it inside BrightGauge that didn't go with BrightGauge. You and your brother kept that. That's Strety. So that is now Strety is software to enable companies using the EOS and other business operating systems to run that process and use software to do that.
Yeah, and that's yeah,
Okay.
that I appreciate that segue. Yeah, so we had it internally at BrightGauge. I loved EOS. I thought it was phenomenal. There was no software really for it, so we built our own. Again,
Yeah.
very similar to my previous tale. I didn't think, the EOS market, the amount of companies that would use EOS was going to be big enough to support a full software company. And I was dead wrong about that. I think EOS and traction has taken off, and it's well deserved.
Yeah.
And when Larry, who had left BrightGauge and who was trying to keep the Strety thing around, he was like, "Hey, I think the market's truly adopting EOS like in a big way." And
Yeah.
it was about 2 years after my retirement, and I was it was a perfect timing because I agreed with him. I saw, competitors popping up and building EOS software. I saw the numbers of 250,000 companies running EOS. So it reignited that
Hmm.
passion. Like, oh, there is something here, and I know I can build
Hmm.
good software. Like, I feel confident with that. And so, yeah, Larry brought me back per se, and we said, you know what? Let's go build the best piece of software. Let's go rebuild the company culture that we had at BrightGauge, and let's do it something that we're super passionate about, which is the EOS, the BOS systems. Um,
Right.
and that's
Yeah.
and that's what we launched. I think it's maybe 15 months ago, 16 months ago, which is Strety today. So now I'm
Wow.
back fully in the game, super happy about it, like enjoying it. I didn't expect it again. I'd
Hmm.
never, but it was a perfect scenario because I can come back, work with friends, build good software, and and do the practical founder story again. I think we have a real shot at it.
I've done this a couple times, getting the band back together after a sale.
Yes,
Is that kind
exactly.
of how it feels? Like you're taking the best thing that you love to do, which was so amazing, and you know, moving out some of the things that didn't work for you, and the new
Yeah,
time, new quest.
exactly. We're a little bit older, a little bit wiser, but yeah, we're leaving the stuff that maybe wasn't as a little too complex and behind. Like for instance, we're all
Hmm.
remote. The product itself
Ah,
is a little bit more straightforward than an analytics product with all that data. And it's
yeah.
something that we all. The other thing too is, and from yes, bringing the band back together is great, but as the company, like there's 10 of us
Hmm.
now,
I see.
everyone understands EOS. Everyone understands why it's great, and everyone understands why business operating systems work better because everyone worked for somewhere else. It was chaos, and
Yeah.
now they're back. The
Yeah.
band's back together, but they see that EOS mentality. Whereas before, we were building analytics for MSPs. You get to 15, 20, 30 employees. Not a lot of them have that same connection to the end
Yes.
product, right? The end result. So this one's
Right.
got that great energy of like, we all get
Okay.
it. So every decision we make, from customer support to sales, we're all rowing the same direction just naturally, which is pretty awesome.
That's one of the things about, let's say, a more horizontal
Yeah.
business tool, productivity tool, right? Is people can
Yep.
understand it more, and the use cases and all of that. So you
Yeah.
got 10 employees, and you've got, can you give us a state of play of Strety right now? It's
Yeah.
Strety.com,
Yes.
but how many customers and partners or whatever you've got going?
Yeah. We're I'm gonna say 700 paying,
Oh
over $1 million
gosh.
in
Wow.
revenue and growing fast. Over $1 million in ARR, obviously, and
Yeah.
it's a different beast, right? 10 employees is probably good enough for a while. So we're still losing money right now, but we'll be profitable by the end of the year easily, which is
Hmm.
exciting. A little bit
And are
faster than
you
we did
writing checks to
previously.
the business? This is your business, and you're bootstrapping it and self-funding it?
Yep, my brother, myself, and Larry, our
Oh,
business partner, are as the three main. And the other thing different this time around is that the employees that are the band that's getting back together, we've issued shares this time around.
ah,
Previously, we didn't, and although everyone got bonuses, we thought it'd
yeah,
be more fun knowing that
yeah,
Brian could sell it one day, right? Or Brian and Larry could sell it one day.
yeah.
At least everyone has skin in the game, so that's a little different
Hmm.
dynamic, but still a good one.
Yeah. Well, I had Mark Abbott on the podcast a couple of years ago from 90.io, which also makes software for the business operating systems and the EOS world. So, and I know three other founders who are building software to help you run your crazy business better.
Yeah, yeah,
Sometimes related to EOS, sometimes not. I don't know if it's a very crowded space these days, but how are you differentiating yourself in this space? Again, you didn't create EOS, and you're using their
right.
terminology these days. How are you standing out?
Yeah, yeah. It's a great question, and funny enough, Mark actually lives. He's a neighbor of mine here, so we just met for
Yeah.
coffee a couple weeks ago in Utah. So we both moved here and now we're competing, but very friendly. The I think the big difference, we're software people through and through, and we're
Mm,
bootstrapped. So I know, when I compare to the competitors that I know, and I don't know, Greg, which ones you're talking about. It's not too crowded of a space. Productivity in general
yeah.
is crowded, but the BOS world isn't too crowded. And our differentiator is, we're in this because it's a passion project for EOS, and we love building software, and that's a different mentality. And we're not raising any money and don't have to. That's a
Hmm.
different way to build certain feature sets. It's a different opinion on the same product than our
Yes.
competitors. So
Yeah.
we differentiate by being better. We're at feature parity, and we've been around for 12 months, and they've been around for 8 years. And just it's the little decisions we make that make our product lighter, better, faster, whatever the terms may be. But that seems to be resonating, and I'm okay with that, right? I think there's the competitive landscape of any industry is that, hey, there's more competition is better. That means there's a big market. I think we're all winning right
Yeah.
now, but
Hmm.
we're definitely standing out as we're new, we're software builders, true and true, and we're building. We are the operators, right?
Yeah.
We're not a VC backed company. We're not coaches building a system. Like, we are operators ourselves, and we're building it that way.
Hmm.
So far so good.
Well, and Jason Fried described his philosophy in project management with Basecamp, one of the most popular
Yeah,
SaaS products out there. He's not publicly, venture funded or publicly funded. They don't sell to enterprise. They have a
yeah,
culture of making great, great, great products and not, charging crazy prices for it and doing amazing
yeah,
things for their customers. And you can put Basecamp side by side with the big project management tools, and they look very different. Is that a similar kind of
yeah.
story?
Yeah, very similar. I mean, extremely similar, right? There's so many project management tools, but they stand out quite a bit because of their opinion. We have a very similar story. I think because EOS is, the terms that we're now licensed to use, because that was a
You're
Mark and his
licensed to use
firm.
now. Okay.
Yeah, so we're licensed to use the EOS terms, and so those terms are similar. So you can kind of see it side by side, but the way the product's built is a much different feel to it, similar to how Basecamp does versus like
Ah.
Asana or these larger things. And you know, again, we're building for operators. We're building for ourselves, and
Hmm.
and we're software builders. And man, what a difference! And that's the very similar line to the Basecamp
Yeah.
world. So
And, product does make a difference, right? The way an Apple iPhone works or a Mac laptop works is different than a Windows laptop or an Android device, and you
yeah,
can tell the difference, and people pay a premium for the difference there. Is your product, let's say, cheaper and easier than the incumbent, which is a classic market entry
yeah.
strategy, or are you kind
Uh,
of at price parity as well?
I think we're a little bit less expensive. I haven't checked their pricing in a while, and the two other companies that we compete with. I think we're
Yeah.
either a little bit less expensive or at parity. But if and this is something I learned from the Basecamp guys a couple of years ago. If people are looking to switch, there's a reason, right? Like, if
Uh,
and this is what we, as a practical founder, and something that I learned from the previous one, like, if people are looking to switch, that means there's a problem, and you got to figure out what that problem is and have that solution for it. So early on for us, like last year, was we're a highly integrated software product. So you use our
ah,
competitor's product, it's a siloed SaaS product. You use
ah,
ours now, and you're in Microsoft Teams, we're an app inside Teams.
I see.
So, and people continue to look to switch from us, and now there's a better feel to the product. It's easier to use. It's
Hmm.
it's a nicer UI, just those types of terms. But
Yeah.
with a big enough market, we're able to quickly insert ourselves as a player, which has been great. And I believe it goes back to just, again, focusing on the customer and building something that they get behind. And you can tell they get behind it by just the usage, the excitement, the love that we get back.
Are you
So
using the EOS structure and methodology even at 10 employees when things are fast and you're kind of crazy and do
yeah,
this and everything's this week? And I mean, are you being pretty systematic? When you have 50 or 100 employees, you have some
yeah, you need
systems are
to.
required, but are you using it as a startup?
Yeah, at 10 employees, it's certainly, at 4 employees, it's pretty hard to use a full-fledged system. But yeah, at 10, where you have a few different teams, again, that goes back to the L10, those weekly meetings. Like that tool, I mean, that it just works. And so we've ingrained that to start. We have one meeting a week as a team, as the three teams that we have. There's
Yeah.
no more meetings in our company, right? So like, I am not, and I should say this, I like I think the Basecamp Jason Fried guys, Jason Fried, I hate meetings, and that's, but you need them, right? They're a
Yeah.
requirement for all businesses. So yes, we still use the L10 every week. We have some annual goals, but we're a little looser on that since we're so small. We believe strongly in our core values, and we hire for that. But that's, so far so pretty easy. But yeah, we're big believers in, because if you don't have an operating system like EOS, you do. It's just a crappy one.
Yeah, right. It's
It's
like whether
just
whether you have an explicit culture you thought about and enforce,
exactly,
or you don't, you have a culture, right? So whether
exactly.
you like
So
it or not, that's great.
yeah, ours, and the, to go back to the competition, we like the scrappy underdog. Like, we're new
Hmm.
to this. Hey, there's someone already here. I mean, Power BI was like that with BrightGauge. There was an existing product in that MSP world,
Hmm.
that wasn't very strong, but it was like, oh well, there's something there already. It's like, it's okay if there's something there. That means there's people
Yeah.
buying it.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. There's less anxiety this time around than last time, right? Because you kind of know that there's plenty of market. Let's build. Let's stay true. Let's be frugal and smart. And those constraints, right? Constraints can really create some beautiful power. That's our leverage point. I think you actually said that to
Right.
me when we met.
Hmm.
The resource constraint of money is a leverage point to
Yeah,
the
you go find
enterprise.
leverage inside your business, and you don't imagine it's going to come from magical
Exactly.
funding that makes products better, or go to market easier.
Yeah.
What are your go to market magic tricks? There's a very large community of
Yeah.
EOS implementer partners,
Yeah.
and in
Coaches,
every
right? Like
city,
coaches.
coaches. There we go. So,
Yeah.
are you working through the coaches and promoting in other ways, or is there a go to market lever that you're relying on?
Right now it's winning hearts and minds. So
Mm.
we call it hand to hand combat. And I think, the practical founders will understand that
Yeah.
analogy. So we're spending very little money on paid advertising, more of a
Hmm.
billboard mentality. And the rest of it is, let's get out in front of the people. So whether it's trade shows, steak dinners, even in cities, but if we can show our product, so 90% of the people, and that's not a pun intended to the name of the other
Hmm.
firm, that see our product in comparison will switch to us. So we
Hmm.
just got to show them the product. And those business coaches, those EOS implementers,
Hmm.
we have another BOS that we work with, but they're just, they're set in their ways. Hey, I get a client, I put them on X software company. So
Hmm.
we just have to get in front of them to say, hey, this is why we're different. This is what your clients will enjoy more, and that is very much hand to hand combat, from a go to market strategy.
You love that game. You're back in the game, hand to hand
Yeah,
combat.
yeah. You
Gritting
put
it
the
out.
knife in your teeth and you just
Yes,
go,
right.
you go
Pirate.
charge.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, that's great. Is this about the
Yeah.
same price point as your previous product, like $300 a month plus? And
No,
up from there. Yeah.
our average price point's below 200. This is
Oh,
less
really?
expensive than a previous one. I think it's more
Wow.
valuable, right?
Hmm.
Than an analytics company, but and that's the other thing that's changed in 10 years. We were able to bootstrap that one a little bit easier. Price points were higher.
Wow.
Cost of employees was lower. I mean, conferences that we spend now, let's say 15K, trade show used to be 5K. So
Yes.
anyway, the numbers are a little different, but the volume is definitely making up for the lower price point. And you know, my we go back and forth a lot on pricing, but once they see it, they love it. Once they start using it, it spreads, and that's, we pay
Usage
per
inside
user.
the company. Yeah.
Yeah,
Land and
yeah,
expand.
yeah.
Yeah.
Land and expand, but also like the word of mouth has been big for us, and so
Oh,
yeah,
great.
even as soon as we get, so although I think people should be spending $500 a month on this product because it's so valuable from the
Yeah, of course.
calmness that it provides.
Yeah.
But the market has already gone pretty inexpensively, so we're trying to match that part.
Okay. And so that takes a lot of companies, a lot of customers to build a
Yeah.
one, five, $10 million business. Brian, what are you thinking about this now? You don't have you have the optionality to say we can run it for a long time, like Jason Fried, now 20 years
Yeah.
with Basecamp, or run it to a point that makes sense, or not to sell it, or what's the operating vision in your plan?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, and it's the honest answer is we don't know. We have given shares out, so people, there is always an expectation
Yeah.
of an exit
Hmm.
or at least a liquidity event, but
Yeah.
not when you give those out. But our team doesn't have that expectation. So right now, the operating model is grow. I want to get past 10 million and beyond. I think
Hmm.
based on our competitors and the market that we've seen, there's plenty of room for that. I'm having an absolute blast, and we believe that we can grow this thing to 10, 20 million in annual recurring revenue at 20, 30, 40 employees. And that's truly the base camp mentality
Yeah. Uh-huh.
of
Uh-huh.
keeping it small. And that's to me, that's the most exciting. I think once I get there, let's say we get to 15 million and we have 15 employees, I'm like, oh, that okay, mission accomplished. But yeah, it's hard to say with any definitive answer. Like the Basecamp guys are always like, hey, I'm either going to sell, it's going to die, or something else. We're kind of in that same boat, but we know there's a lot of work ahead of us, right, to get there.
Well, a lot of founders who are passionate about their customers and the problem and the puzzle
Yeah,
of the business and the product, right? We love this. I
yeah,
love this, right? And I'm
yeah,
one
yeah,
of them. We're kind of fanatics about it. Like when we sell our companies, it's kind of like a hole is, ripped at us. And
yeah,
we realize how passionate we wanted an outlet for our passion and, with be around to do crazy important things with really amazing
yeah,
people is pretty much the game. A
yeah,
lot of founders I know say, "I wish I wouldn't have sold, then I could continue to run it forever." And Jason Fried has the wisdom
yeah.
not to have gone through that to say that. But did you have that experience? I sold it, and it was really bleak, and I just need to get back in the game and do it. Or was it? Are you more a little more enlightened than the rest of us fanatics?
No, no. That's a great question. Actually, I talked about it with my wife yesterday. I definitely I think if both companies stayed together, we'd be much bigger than the independence parts are. I think that would have been fun. I certainly had an identity challenge post sale of
Yeah,
BrightGauge was my baby. I started when I was 28. The
yeah.
day before we got married, it was when the idea came up, and the day my son was born was when my the hoopla started. So
Hmm.
there's definitely an identity gap. I did fine with it. So I don't regret selling because I'm a big believer
Okay,
that everything happens for a reason. But
there we go.
yeah, I don't. There's nothing exciting to me about selling Strety anytime soon. I am like the passion that we all have for business, and I'll tell you that in this crazy world we live in, a problem that will not go away is how to run a small business.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Like we're going to solve a lot of problems, but how to organize people or robots, whatever we want to say in the future, but how to run a group of people on a mission that won't go away. I think EOS is a great way to run a company, just like other operating systems are. But
Hmm.
software is not going away, and so I just think there's so much room and so much excitement, and this is a space that I don't know I get jazzed up about. Obviously,
And you support other business operating systems besides EOS
yeah,
and other flavors. If people want to roll their own, they say, "Well,
yeah,
we use a little EOS and a little of this, and we do it this way, and that works for us." Can they mix and match, or that
yeah,
kind of thing?
yeah. I mean, that's how we started the Strety. Like we didn't have an EOS license, we didn't use their terms, but we still grew, plenty because there's a lot of folks that just take flavors of EOS and flavors of
Yeah,
this other system,
yeah,
and Vern Harnish has one, and all these
yes.
different things.
Scaling up.
Scaling up, that's what I knew this word. So yeah, it's very flexible. EOS just seems to be the big fish, and again, one that did a lot for me. So I was very proud
Hmm.
that we got the license and we can represent the brand. But but yeah, there's other ways to run a company, and it all goes down to the foundational tools. You got to have meetings, you got to set goals, you got to have tasks, and we have some other ideas that we'll be playing with in the next 6 months. But yeah, a lot of folks have their own custom flavor. Pinnacle Business Guides was like an offshoot of EOS, and they have 100 coaches versus EOS has like 800, and they're
Hmm.
growing fast, and they have a different flavor on how to run a business. So we actually their preferred partner, and we love working with their clients. So we're agnostic.
Hmm.
We're just passionate about software, which is different than competitors, and that's what's great.
Okay.
And we love the problem of how do I run my business better as an executive. Maybe all this is just self-centered, right? Like I'm probably just building this for me as a young person, trying to run some businesses. But
Well,
So
that's
that's
how
how most
Jason
of them
Frieda
start.
Basecamp approaches it. We're the best customer. We're our, we're the power user, best customer, and it has to work for us. And it reflects his mindset about how to run a business and how to
Yeah, I've
coordinate
probably read too
people.
many
And
of their books because I've become a little bit too similar to them in that sense. But yeah,
well, he's not a goal setting guy, and you are, right? So you guys found different ways to coordinate things. Like the how
yeah,
is a little different, you would say, but
yeah,
what maybe
yeah, and
not so
that's
much.
but
Yeah.
the value of freedom and that is big, right? That's why all these practical, most probably practical founders start and sustain is the lifestyle, right? The lifestyle business
Hmm.
that it provides, the freedom like that. I mean, from seeing my father have it to me enjoying it at BrightGauge to having it now, like there's nothing better, and it takes a lot to succeed. But they at Basecamp, I think that's what they've done a phenomenal job. And now you are doing with this podcast
Hmm.
of saying, hey, there is a potentially better way. If you like that way, I
Hmm.
do. And this is it. And this is how people are successful. So it gives people like me confidence that, hey, I can go that route and live that way. And that's pretty
Yeah.
awesome.
And I would say, and do it your way. You're concocting your own
Yes.
mix of all of these that
Right.
works for you and
Greg,
this
have you ever,
phase and this market and so forth. And every practical founder interview I've had on the podcast and all the ones that I know is pretty much a story. And here's another way to do it. You could take
yeah,
some of
yeah.
that, and here's another way to do it. And there's so many
You,
ways to do it. You don't have to follow anybody's template. You can roll your own.
exactly. Have you ever read the book Anything You Want by Derek Sivers?
I have not.
So easy read. He was a eclectic tech founder from 10
Hmm.
years ago, and he
Yeah.
wrote this book called Anything You Want. It was all about, he was a musician turned software
Hmm.
guy, self-taught. He's a big thinker, and I know. So that book really resonated with me, and I'm giving a talk at the EOS conference, and I'm going to reference this book. That's why
Oh,
it's top
fun.
of mind. But it is, it was a great read of like, yes, you're right. This is you can do it your own way, and that was mind bending. And the now CEO of Intercom, the big tech
Hmm.
company, he just wrote a tweet recently saying like, enough of this corporate BS. I've done this wrong my whole time. Now it's the way I want to run things. Something along
Yeah.
that way of thinking. But you're right. Like if you start a company and it starts working, you have the choice. So you run it whichever way you want. EOS, Basecamp style, this style, whatever. But
Yeah.
that that creative freedom in itself is pretty amazing. So
Yeah, and then independence, freedom has a cost to it, right? The hard work, the
yeah,
investment, and the focus, and the discipline, and so forth that are not free, right?
no,
So
for sure.
yeah,
My wife can
but
attest.
yeah, but we will we'll fight for our freedom, right? We've bought our
Exactly.
independence, and we're not going back. If you know, and
Exactly.
this is an amazing new world. Brian, what advice do you have for practical founders out there that we haven't talked about today? You've got some real gems there already that you advise most often. There's founders show up in Park City or in Miami, and or somebody wants to connect with you. What is it that you can take away from your experiences that you think would be most useful for practical founders?
So I would say one of the things that I learned that I even apply to today is, everything compounds. So you have to just take one step forward. Nothing is easy, and everything's different. Everyone has challenges, but if you just stay disciplined and dedicated, the outcomes should be there, right? So work your butt off every day. Don't let up. And if you don't even pick your head up, in a couple of years, you'll look up and say, "Oh wow, I built a $5 million business or a $3 million
Yeah.
business." I think that was something we haven't touched on, but like that one's big for me and that resonates. Like I just got to stay in the game, especially as a practical founder. So much hype comes in, so much hype leaves. And if you just do your job, take care of your customer, and like if the revenue's coming in and profit as well, once you get to that level, like you're winning. Like you're competing
Yeah.
against yourself. That's one thing that's another good tidbit is
Yeah.
I never look at the competitors' websites and all that. So that is just noise. You really compete against
Mm.
yourselves and your own way. So anyway, that's my big advice is stay disciplined and everything compounds.
Right. And that's the magic of these practical founder businesses that is so unsexy to most people is that the grit and the compounding of the SaaS flywheel business, right? Which is why they're worth so much when you get to 5 or 10 million and keep
Yeah,
on going because it's a flywheel and it's really an amazing business. It's an amazing time for founders to build, to change the world with people they love changing the world with and build something valuable for themselves and their
for sure.
families.
And I mean, I get a lot of value from, people that use BrightGauge that then come to me at a conference and say, man, that really like that product helped me tremendously. People have said it changed his life, which I think is
Changed my
aggressive, but
life. Yeah,
I'll,
that's right. Hmm.
I'll take it. But and it's like, oh, it was an overnight success type of thing. And it's like, nope, there's 10 years, 9 years of grind, which I know people on this podcast listening can feel it. I think my biggest takeaway, and Greg, you helped me when we met a couple of weeks ago, was like, there's a lot of us out here. This is a very viable way to build a
Yes.
great, highly valuable business or a, or both, right? A lifestyle business.
Yeah.
And so that, if you can believe in that, this way of life and this way of thinking, the broad stroke of a practical founder, and put your head down and work every day, in 3 to 5 years, which is a short time frame, right? 3 to 5 years, you'll be way ahead of your peers and way ahead of where even you thought. So yeah,
Awesome.
thank you for giving me that excitement when we met a couple weeks ago.
Well, it's the hidden majority of software founders out there by number of companies, right? Not by the funding and the size of the one, the visibility of it, but around the world, practical founders make up the majority of software companies there. So,
Yeah,
Brian, I really appreciate you sharing your story of BrightGauge and Strety on the Practical Founders podcast.
yeah. Thanks for having me, Greg. It was a great time.
Thank you. Thanks for watching this week's founder interview on the Practical Founders podcast. Be sure to hit like and then subscribe to my Practical Founders YouTube channel to keep up with my weekly videos for serious software founders who are building valuable companies without big funding. Check out my blog and information about my Practical Founders CEO peer groups at practicalfounders.com. And follow me on LinkedIn to keep the conversation going. See you next week.